because it really allows us to research a little bit more on various topics and get deeper into that conversation and everything. And
that's right. And it makes us consider things before. And then when we do go for a meeting with our caregiver, obstetrician or midwife, we're not lost for words when there's that opportunity to have the conversation about what's important to us.
Talking about the various aspects of preparing for childbirth, the physical, the mental, the emotional and the spiritual. And this part, we're going to be discussing the mental aspects of preparing for childbirth, Anna.
So the phrase knowledge is power comes to me about the mental aspect. And I do believe it's really essential to become educated around childbirth. And I know there's a saying that sometimes women say, I'll just go with the flow around childbirth. And my question there is, well, whose flow is that? Is it the flow of the hospital? Is it their procedures and policies? Is it the flow of the partner or your support team around you? Because when we go with the flow, it might take some pressure off the woman feeling that she needs to perform if she's just going with the flow. However, we're leaving ourselves wide open if we do that. So I would prefer to suggest doing the preparation and then feeling comfortable to sink into the flow, knowing that you've got that knowledge there. And so on a practical level, I really recommend couples doing some childbirth preparation classes. And I would also recommend going to an independent childbirth educator. And that could be also childbirth classes. It could be hypnobirth or calm birth classes. And in addition to that, I also suggest going to the classes that are run at your place of birth. So that might seem like a lot to suggest doing an independent class as well as going along to the information evenings often at the hospital. But it's important that you know what the place of birth offers and whether that aligns with what your wishes are. And if not, then you have time to have that discussion as we were talking earlier. So I really encourage pregnant women and their partners to go along to classes. And in the mental area, I wanted to mention, Annalie, the whole concept of fear, and that often fear arises because we don't know what's ahead. And so there's the acronym for fear, which is false evidence appearing real. So that it's false evidence, we don't know for certain, and it appears to be real. So we may have heard things about birth. We may have seen things on television because, unfortunately, that's a place where birth is portrayed regularly as a medical emergency. And, of course, it isn't. Birth is not usually that the membranes rupture and the woman's racing off to the hospital in a matter of minutes and suddenly pushing the baby out. It's a progressive process of labour. So I do believe that to dissipate the fear is to be more informed, to become educated, and to find information that is empowering around birth. And there's a lot of that out there on the internet. There's also a school of thought that pregnant women need to be surrounded by things of beauty. And that would also include discussions, positive discussions about birth. So if someone does begin to tell you a story of a traumatic birth experience, I feel that it's quite within a pregnant woman's rights to say, I'm sorry, I know that's your experience, and I am wanting to affirm for myself my own experience, which I'm heading towards now. So I'm not the best person to talk to about that. And perhaps more pregnant women need to stand up for themselves in that area, so that they do hear more positive stories around birth. And the smallest comment can plant a seed that can really generate fear.
Absolutely.
And as you say, Annalie, that's in no way to negate that. It's very important for mothers who have had less than ideal births to share their stories. I totally support that. It's just about the environment that can happen. And as a pregnant woman, to focus on the things that are empowering you around the birth experience that you're planning.
Is there anything else on the mental, or do we lean in a little bit to the emotional aspects?
Yes, that's an interesting one, how the mental and the emotional are very closely aligned, because it is our thoughts that can really affect our feelings. And I like that saying, a thought, a belief is just a thought I keep thinking.
Yeah.
And so we can choose those beliefs to be negative or positive. And so if we do find ourselves fixating on something negative around birth, we can use the phrase, I choose to release that belief. And just see if there's a more positive one that can come in instead. And of course, there's the saying that there's only two feelings. One is fear and the other is love. Yeah. So when we come back to the place of love, to love, the love for our baby, the love in our relationship, then that can really help to also release fears.
I guess, though, the mental element that has such impact on the emotional element is so powerful. I know from myself it was like that. I know from all the birth stories I've heard from so many women over the years, and how those, it's really not just for the mother to be thinking of her own mental hygiene, as perhaps we can say, but also for her birth supporters, so all the people that are going to be supporting her, her partner, her parents, her siblings, for them to be very hyper aware, I'd like to say, because pregnancy is a hyper experience where our emotions are hyper, our mental capacities are much more stronger, we're much more intuitive as when we're pregnant, and all of these aspects of our what makes us up, they're much more heightened. And so I'd like to suggest for the people that are around a pregnant woman to be hyper aware that any comment that they make or story that they tell or ideas that they have themselves around birth can be quite impactful for the woman during pregnancy.
Yes,
and I think that's also really important.
Yes, because she's a pregnant woman is much more sensitive to those sort of comments. And I've heard of pregnant women who have chosen where they want to give birth. For example, if they're choosing home birth, they may decide that they don't want to share that with the greater community to feel strong in their own choices. And I support that. It's sad that it has to be that way, but I do support a woman when she's made her choices to feel strong and empowered and connected with that choice. And she doesn't have to share that with others unless she really wants to. We could start exploring the emotional side of things because, as we just said, everything is heightened and sensitized in pregnancy, and so the emotions are also usually heightened. And many women will say that even if they're not a person who cries a lot, then suddenly in pregnancy. And of course, this is all the beautiful hormones getting us ready for birth. So there's nothing wrong with having a good cry. And in fact, I sometimes feel that we could do with those hormones at other times in our life too. Of course, there are other rites of passage when that happens, such as menopause, for example. But for pregnant women, yes, the emotions can be really heightened. And so I really encourage pregnant women to explore those feelings, to not push them away, to really look at what are those feelings that are arising and why. And so sometimes we'll say this is a woman's intuition, but for others we could say it's the gut feeling. And as we mentioned before, when women are exploring their choice of birthplace, if something doesn't feel right, even if it's just a little niggle that doesn't feel right, perhaps you have a discussion with your obstetrician that just doesn't feel completely supportive of your plans or your caregiver, allow those feelings to arise and come to a place of how you could communicate that, and how you can come back to a place of balance within yourself about those things. So definitely, the permission to explore the emotions. And as we know that, sometimes we might feel angry about things, angry about the way women are treated in birth. But underneath the anger, there could be another feeling. And ultimately, those fears that we just mentioned can arise. And so let's create a space that is safe to explore those feelings. and then things can move ahead. Once it's expressed, it can be released. And just coming back to that beautiful song that you played earlier, Annalie, Fields of Gold, coming back to the heart space, the field of gold. I think that's a beautiful visualization and meditation, and which leads really lovely, in a lovely way, to the spiritual side of preparation. So when we say spiritual, it doesn't mean that a pregnant woman needs to go off into a cave and meditate for weeks on end on her own, of course. But what it does mean is creating space where you might connect more with your intuition, with your baby, and set up a pathway between yourself and your baby in utero. And so that beautiful image of the field of gold in your heart, let's connect that into your womb space and bring that golden energy down and around your baby, and come into that quiet listening space where you may even hear the wishes of your baby around birth. Yeah, coming into that intuitive space. Yes. And how can we do that if we're not used to meditating? Well, again, prenatal yoga is a good place. Practicing yoga nidra is a really powerful way to have a guided process that allows you to drop into that deeper space of intuition.
So yoga nidra is a kind of guided imagery. Guided and very deep relaxation.
It's called psychic sleep. That's the term, what the term yoga nidra means. Very powerful practice for a pregnant woman to do, because it unconsciously helps to release fears as well while you're doing that relaxation practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I highly recommend that. And just giving yourself some space. Perhaps it's going and sitting near the ocean. Perhaps it's going and sitting in nature somewhere, giving yourself the time to drop into more connection with Mother Earth. And in that space of connection with Mother Earth, allowing the things that we've spoken about earlier, the mental thoughts, to dissipate and come back into that space of deeper alignment with your own spirit. Because it is all of us that gives birth. So it's all of those areas, and particularly that connection to spirit, and knowing that you are safe, you are protected, and that you can trust your own body in birth.
You have been listening to Anna Watts, founder of the Celebration of Birth Doula Academy. Go to celebrationofbirth.com for more information, and to our website pbbmedia.org for this podcast and many more like it.